Today is Friday, Chav Beis Teves Tovshin Gimel. We are in Teiras Menachem Sefer HaMa'amorim Tovshin Yud Aleph Tovshin Yud Beis on page Nun Aleph in the middle of chapter 3, Ois Gimel of the Mamar Vayedaber Hashem Zos Chukas of Shabbos Pashas Shmini Pashas Porah Tovshin Yud Aleph. We're going to have to take this in stages because we're going into some heavy stuff. And very Yesodis Dikin Nekudis, very fundamental idea in the whole of Chassidus Chabad, really, this idea of Rotza B'Shoiv. And in fact, within this, I think, is wrapped up, to an extent, the fundamental difference between Chabad, Chassidus, and all other Chassidus.
Did you see my reply to your email?
I did. And then obviously threaded within it are also other ideas which are very Yesodis and needs a little more expounding. I mean, the format of this sheet is to try to get through as much material as we can, but I think this Nekuda of Rotza B'Shoiv, ebb and flow, warrants more delving into. But I think we should take it in stages. And the first stage will be simply to go through the Pirush HaMilas, the taich of the words, Pasha, simply to go through the text and to see what the Rebbe says. And then to try to break it down and to see, to delve into it more deeply. I think on Sunday, which is Chavdala Tevis, Emir Hashem will focus more on this concept of Rotza B'Shoiv, how this is looked upon by the Alter Rebbe, how this is looked upon by the other Chassidish Rebbes or Chassidic masters like the Melech of Lizensk and others. And there is a difference. There is quite a fundamental difference. So let's at least try now to go through as much of Ois Gimel as we can, simply in teaching the words of the Rebbe and through a process of what we call immersion. I think we'll make some headway. So we're in the middle of Ois Gimel, and we are discussing the idea of Rotza B'Shoiv. And the Rebbe explains that there is a dichotomy, there's a paradox in the godly life force that gives life to all worlds and to all creatures, and so too also in the neshama. What is this paradox? The paradox is that on the one hand, the Chayes Eliki, the godly life force, has this tnuah, this mode of being drawn to its source, going away from the environment that it has come down to give life to, being drawn away to its source. On the other hand, it's got this motivation to come back down and to give life to the creatures, to the realms, to the beings that it was destined to provide that life to. So, and this is constant. This process is a constant process. On the one hand, being drawn back to its source. On the other hand, going back down to give life to Nivraim, to creatures and to creation. Why is that? So the Rebbe says this paradox actually stems from the same Nekuda, from the same point. They're both fueled by the same idea. What is this? What fuels this? It's the same. We'll start from V'nimtza. We are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 8 lines from the bottom. 2 words from the end of the line by the full stop. V'nimtza. The line begins with the word ha'or. The second to the last word on the line is V'nimtza. V'nimtza. It comes out. What's the result? She'oisa hasiba shegarma l'tnuah derotzu. The same reason, the same cause that caused the mode of rotzu, the mode of going out of itself, going out from the environment that it gives life to, and being drawn back to its source. What causes that? What causes that mode in this godly life force? The hainu, Hergish Mekari, the fact that it feels its source, and as mentioned before, that I've explained, that this godly life force, as it is in its source, is in a much higher level, at a much higher state. Its consciousness, its awareness of godliness, and its connection to godliness is much greater, much more intense when it's in its source. So therefore, since it feels its source, that is what causes it to want to be drawn to its source. So the same reason that causes it to be drawn to its source, which is what? The feeling and the awareness, the conscious awareness, the conscious feeling of its source, he hageremes l'shuv. It's the same thing that causes it to return, to go back down to the environment that it gives life to. Why? Because it is its source that desires that this light should shine down to the nivraim, to creatures, to creation. Right? So the paradox emanates from the same point. That's the point that Rebbe makes here. This is one yesod. Why is it drawn to its source? Because it feels its source. And it feels that in its source, it'll be at a much higher level. So it's drawn to it. But once it feels its source, it also feels that its source wants it to come back down and to illuminate its environment, to give life to the Nivraim. So the same consciousness, the same feeling, the same awareness that causes it to be drawn to its source, by definition also causes it to return. If that's the case, why then do we have creatures that are not in a mode of Ratzav Hashem? If you remember, we discussed yesterday that when we talk about the human being, the involuntary functions of the human being, we find this idea of Ratzav Hashem, the fikud liba, the pulse, the heartbeat, the breath, the inhaling and the exhaling, right? We'll get to the discussion which one is Ratzav, which one is Shev. But let's just develop the idea first, the Pirush HaMilas, right? So, but on the other hand, we know full well from ourselves that we're not constantly in this constant Ratzav Hashem mode of ebb and flow, desiring to go up to Hashem and coming back down. It happens, but not constant. Why is that? So in other words, there are creatures that are not in this constant mode of Ratzav Hashem, of ebb and flow. It's precisely this reason. Because they do not have consciously the feeling of their source and the cleaving to their source. In other words, a being that cleaves to its source, where its connection to its source is revealed, there's nothing that conceals over it, will be in a constant mode of Ratzav Hashem. Hergish hamoker, the feeling of the source. Udveikis bamoker, and the cleaving to the source. Right? So a malach, for example, who feels its source permanently, constantly, is in a constant mode of Ratzav Hashem, for the reasons just described. A nivra, like us, a human being, because there is something that conceals the source and doesn't allow that source to be in a permanent state of revelation within the nivra, in a conscious way, within the creature, therefore, that creature will not be, a human being, will not be in a constant mode of Ratzav Hashem. Now the Rebbe goes on to say, like, and the Rebbe spells it out. So too it is also concerning souls. That a neshama, in its conscious state, is not in a constant mode of Ratzav Hashem. The Hagam sheyodua, although it is known, sheneshamas heim masha elokus nasa nivra, although it is known that neshama, what's a neshama? A neshama is godliness as it comes into being into something created, godliness as a created entity. I'll get to that in a second. Nonetheless, they are still within the confines and characterized as a creation. That's why the neshama is not constantly in the mode of Ratzav Hashem, going out and returning, going out and coming back. Ebb and flow. What does it mean, Elikus Nasa Nivra? What is the difference between a neshama? Again, I'm just going to now focus on the Pirush HaMilas, because otherwise we're just going to get carried away and distracted. I'm going to try to break it down into pieces. Let's focus on the Pirush HaMilas. What is the difference between a neshama and a malach? What is the difference between a human being and a malach? For example, concerning a human being, it says, Na'asa Odom b'tzalmeinu kidmusenu. Man is created in the image of God. What about a malach? A malach is not created in the image of God. Specifically, man is in the image of God. Man has free choice. Malach doesn't have free choice. Right? And by definition, man is not constantly in a mode of rotzav v'shoiv, the neshama of man. I'm talking about the neshama. Right? Is not constantly in a mode of rotzav v'shoiv, and a malach is. A malach is a nivra. A malach is a created being. What is creation? Yes, of course, there's nothing outside of Hashem and Einedim Milvada, as we discussed in one of the Shiurim about Yichud Ilah, Yichud Tata, and so on and so forth, right? Everything is, what does Hashem Echad mean? That everything in the world is godliness. There's no existence outside of the world, outside of godliness. Yichud Tata means, as we explained, what does it mean? That creation has no independent existence. But there's a difference between all of creation and man, the neshama of man. The neshama of man is an entity, is godliness itself coming into godliness itself as a created being. What does that mean? A malach, you know what, let's talk about Memala and Seviv, for example. Right? If you remember when we discussed Yichud Ilah, Yichud Tata, it was the difference between, in a sense, the difference between Memala and Seviv. Memala Kalalman says, when we talk about the godly life force that fills the world, what do we say? We say that there is a world, there is creation, there are entities, however, they have no independent existence. And because they have no independent existence, really and truly they don't exist. What exists is the godliness. When we say Seviv Kalam, we say it's only godliness. It's not that they don't have any independent existence. There's no existence at all. Not even a dependent existence. There's nothing at all. When we talk about a neshama, it's getlichkeit. It's not. What's the difference between bria and the lakus? When you say bria means, or for example, what's the difference between atzilus and bia? In bria, tzir aseh, and bia, what do we say? It's yesh me'ayin. What's yesh me'ayin? Yesh me'ayin means that the relationship between the created entity and the getlichkeit is in a way of dilug. There's a leap between the two. There's a separation, there's a jump at some point. Gilui ha'helim means that it's consistently connected and attached. The relationship is a close relationship, a bonded relationship, whereas in yesh me'ayin, it's a distant relationship. Right? There's a separation, there's a dilug, there's a jump. When we talk about a malach is a nivra. Just like there's other nivroim, the Eibishter created the inanimate objects, the Eibishter created also malachim. They're obviously on a much higher level in terms of feeling their source and dvekas and alakus and so on and so forth, but they are created. It's the same process of yesh me'ayin in a davar gashmi that is related to the creation of a malach. It's the same process. Just this is a lower creature, this is a higher creature. Infinitely higher. A neshama is getlichkeit. It's a part of God. What do we say? Chelik elikam imal mamish. It's a part of God. Right? So it's elikus b'bchinas nivra. It's God, kaviyochel, taking himself and turning himself into, taking part of him and making it a created being rather than God. That is why you find the only one that is mitzalmeinu kidmusenu, who is truly in the image of God, is the human being.
The neshama is not yesh mi'ayin, is that what you're saying?
It, but from a much higher source, it's happening.
You just implied that everything else is.
Okay, so this is part of what we have to flesh out, because there are different levels in the neshama. There's nefesh ruach neshama. There's chaya yechida. We say every day in Birchas HaShachar El Kai, neshama shenasatabi tehirahi.
If it's a part.
Hang on.
Yesh, it's not yesh.
So what do we say? We say tehirahi, but then we go on and we say ata berasa. What does Brasa mean?
He created us.
What's Bria? Yesh Me'ayin.
Right.
So there are, you can immediately see that it depends which level of the neshama you're talking about. It depends which aspect of the neshama you're focusing on, and so on and so forth. I don't want to go into it right now. I just want to focus on the. It's a very legitimate question, and this is what we will Mitzvah flesh out in the coming shiurim. But at least let's try to understand the point of the difference, at least in simply in touching the words, the difference between a neshama and a malach, for example, a neshama and all other created beings. It's specifically the neshama that has the ability to a free choice, for example. Why is man in the image of God? Who is a malach has no free choice. A malach is like a stone. The stone can only, in the sense that just like a stone is a stone and that's it, finished. A malach is a malach, and it'll all constantly be in the malach will constantly be in the mode of he's programmed, and that's the way it is. The way he's been programmed at the outset, that's how it remains. A neshama has the ability to choose. Free choice, man has the ability to choose. That comes from the neshama. And that is a direct result from the fact that it's a piece of God. Because who really has free choice? Hashem. And Hashem has given that characteristic into man. How? By taking a piece of himself and turning it into a nivra.
When you say man, you mean Jew.
Nefesh Elokis.
Yeah.
We're talking about Nefesh Elokis, yeah. I mean, again, there are grades, shades and grades, but ultimately we're talking about Nefesh Elokis. Nas Adam B'Tzalmei Kiddush Masenu is all of humankind, right? So there are elements of these. When you're saying free choices, again, you see how we can go from from one topic to another topic, and each one of this is a sugi shlema, and needs, first of all, I need to prepare for it, and second of all, it's arucha meretz midah. So let's first try to touch up what the Rebbe is saying. What he's getting at is, why is it that man is not constantly in a mode of rasa v'shoiv? If you're saying that it's because of the godly life force that is constantly feeling its source. Therefore, because it feels its source, it constantly has this paradoxical process of rasa v'shoiv, ebb and flow. So a neshama, a human being, should also be like that. Why? Even more so, because what is a human being? What a human being is? What does a human being possess in his neshama? Neshama is elokus b'chinas nivra, elokus nasa nivra. It's godliness as a created being. So it should be even more l'chura. It would seem that a person should even be even more in a mode of what? Of constant ratzav v'shev.
It's very confusing.
Correct.
Because earlier on you spoke about Nadiv and Nabiyu, that they went and they didn't come back, and Rabbi Akiva and the other people went because they had the Ratzav but didn't have the Shav. So now you're saying we don't have Ratzav and Shav.
Constantly. Constant. The point that Rebbe is making is in creation, you find this idea of Ratzav v'shev permanently and constantly. Malachim are constantly in a mode of Ratzav v'shev. All the time. In the involuntary functions of the human being, you find the Ratzav v'shev all the time. You can't stop breathing. The heart can't stop beating. So why is it when it comes to the neshama of a yid, to our daily life, why don't we constantly feel like we're being drawn to get l'chayt and coming back down? Constantly. That's the point over here. So that's what the Rebbe says. The hagam she'yadu she'neshamas himashal l'kus nasa nivra, although it is known that what's a neshama? A neshama is godliness as it becomes a creature. So in other words, what's the question? If it is godliness, then it should certainly feel its source, and it should certainly be in a constant mode of Ratzav v'shev, and yet it's not. Why is that? Even though it's godliness, but there's still it's godliness it takes on the characteristics of a created being. Therefore, they're not constantly in this mode of ebb and flow constantly. Why? Again, because there is a concealment. What's a nivra? As we know it in our world, in the yeshus of Elam Hazeh, right? Where it does not feel its source. So a neshama that becomes a nivra, a created being, even though it's godliness, but it takes on the full trappings of a created being, which means that its source is concealed. And therefore, it's not permanently in the mode of Ratzav V'Shev, of ebb and flow. That's number one. The Eidzos, we also find the Lepa'amim, we also find, as we know full well, that a neshama is sometimes in a mode of serving Hashem and sometimes not. Right? So the Rebbe explains. What's the reason? The fact that something is a ha'ara, is an emanation from its source, that's only the reason for it to be Ratzav V'Shev. That's in other words, for something to be able to potentially have this mode of ebb and flow, it needs to be an emanation from its source. It needs to come from its source. But that's only one part of the coin. The other side of the coin is, in addition to this, in addition to being part of its source and coming from its source, it also has to feel its source and has to be in a constant mode of cleaving to its source. Therefore, those creatures that do not feel their source, those creatures that do not feel their source constantly in a conscious way, will not be in a permanent mode of Ratzav V'Shev, of ebb and flow. So therefore, Malachim, who have a godly life force that gives them life, and feel their godly life force constantly and permanently, and the godly life force feels its source, it will have this be in this constant mode of Ratzav V'Shev, ebb and flow. Whereas a neshama that comes down into a guf, and a nivra in our world, by definition, does not feel its source, right? That's the idea of that it does not feel its source; it feels itself as an independent entity. So, although it comes from its source, and even more so, although a neshama is even greater than a malach in the sense that it's godliness as a nivra, godliness as a created being, nevertheless, since it does not feel its source, since its source is hidden from it, it will not be in a constant mode of Ratzav V'Shev. Bear with me, we'll get through it, and then the mitzvah Hashem will become clearer.
Yeah, that's right.